Okay, friends, ball on base passing. It involves, as you would expect, a moving target ball on a base that represents the flight of the ball in the air. For the receiver to catch the pass, he has to make contact with the ball with the front or side of his base. It is not a new concept, but I'm going to give you my spin on it in this tutorial. In a quick summary of how this works, during the passing play, first you're going to identify an open receiver. Once that's done, then the ball is going to be placed using three criteria. One, where the other defenders are in relation to the receiver. Two, the distance the quarterback is from the receiver. And three, the angle the quarterback is to the receiver. Based on those three things, the ball is either going to be placed directly in front of the receiver at a certain distance or on one side of the receiver or the other at a certain angle. So how do I identify when a receiver's open? And then once he's identified, how do I use the criteria I just mentioned to place the ball? For that, I'm going to have to introduce you to the game pieces I've made for ball on base passing. But before we go there, let's talk about the ball on base target ball itself, because the base that you put on this game piece is very important. It has to be slow enough that your skill position players can have a chance to catch up to it when it's placed out in front of them, but also fast enough that when it's angled from the side, that he doesn't consistently outrun it. So you want to have a base that strikes a balance between the two. Now, if you've watched any of my solitaire rule videos, you know that I kind of run a paint by numbers system with my solitaire gameplay. If this happens, this happens. I try to take any interpretation out of it so there's no bias shown to any team and there's nothing that's reliant on my skill. I have created the game pieces in front of you with that same thinking in mind. So here are all the tools that I use for ball on the base passing. We're going to go over one by one. Here's the typical range stick that you would use for passing sticks. It's also going to be used in my ball on base passing system. What I have laying down here on white paper so you can see them more clearly are clear circular templates. I cut these out of plastic dividers that you can find in Staples. The sizes of these game pieces is not important right now, but I have one circle that I use for the red range, a larger one for the white range, and the biggest one for the blue range. And you can see how on each of these circles I've cut them in quarters, and then on one side drew a 45-degree angle in this quarter and in that quarter. And you see I've done that on each one. I call these game pieces coverage circles, and they have two functions. One is to determine if the receivers that are underneath the defensive coverage are open. And the second is to determine the angle the ball on base is placed towards the receiver. If that sounds complicated, believe me, it's not, and I'll show you. These pie-like game pieces will be kind of used as passing sticks and come in two different angles, 30-degree and 45-degree. And there's one pair for each range coverage circle. In other words, one for the red, one for the white, and one pair for the blue. They are used when the ball is being thrown on one side or the other of the receiver. Then we have these two sticks, which are each divided into a red, white, and blue color for use in each range. There is a smaller one for a quarterback under no pressure, and a longer stick for when the quarterback is facing pressure on the throw. And these sticks are used when the ball is being thrown directly in front of the receiver. I also use this little 1/2-inch block of wood. I picked it up at Hobby Lobby. I'll show you its use as we go along. If you've watched my videos, you know I've adopted a 3-stop system on passing plays where the quarterback has to throw to the first open receiver on stops 2 or 3. If he has multiple open receivers, he goes to the one furthest downfield. That's not changing with ball and base passing. For the sake of this tutorial on ball and base passing, I'm skipping to the part in the pass play where the quarterback is identifying an open receiver. It's at that point in the process where things start to change a little bit from what you've seen before. If you want more information about the 3 stoppages, please look at my channel for my passing game tutorial. A receiver in the AEFL is open one of 2 ways. The first way is if the receiver gets behind the defense. It's easy to see. There's no defender anywhere on the board who is in front of the forward plane of the receiver's base. Doesn't matter if the receiver's going downfield or headed toward the sideline. If there's no defender in front of that forward plane of his base, then he's open. Of course, his catch path can't be obstructed by a teammate like this, and his catch path does have to be in bounds. But that's the first scenario where the receiver is open. The other way a receiver is open in the AEFL is if he's got enough room underneath the coverage to catch the ball. And there's no teammates in his way, and the path in front of him to catch the ball is in bounds. Now let's look at the first way a receiver is open, being behind the defense, and how the game pieces that I showed you factor into the play. First, we look at the quarterback and we measure from the center of his helmet with the range stick, and in this case we see the receiver clearly in the white range. So after we use the range stick and we know the receiver is in white in this example, we get the coverage circle that is for the white range, and you see this center line with the 245-degree angles. You take that point right there, you line it up right in front of his helmet, and then you look at the quarterback. And as long as the quarterback is within this arc created by those 245-degree angles, then the ball is going directly in front of the receiver. Now you get out that stick that I told you measures the ball placement when the ball is going out in front of the receiver. It's a short stick because the quarterback's not under any pressure in this example. And remember, the receiver is in the white range, and the middle area of the stick is supposed to represent the white area. And you'll line up that ball on base at the edge of the white area directly in front of the receiver. Then you remove the stick, you pivot the defenders towards the ball, and we run the play. If the receiver touches the ball on the base with the front or side of his base, the pass is complete. If he doesn't, it's incomplete, unless, of course, a defender touches it with the side or front of his base, in which case it's intercepted. Now, if the quarterback is under pressure, and I have a stick to measure that from the center of the defender's helmet, if the quarterback's under pressure and he's throwing it and he's within the arc where it goes over the receiver's head, then we're using the longer stick. And once again, you would line up the back of the base with the edge of the range you're in this case, the white range, which is the middle area of the stick. Then you pivot your defenders and on with the play. Now, what happens if that quarterback is way out there, outside of that arc that I was talking about in the coverage circle? In this situation, it no longer makes sense that the quarterback's throwing it directly over the receiver's head. So I break out this 45-degree angle for the white range. I'll place this game piece at the front corner on the side the quarterback is to the receiver. And I'll use a stick to straighten it out. You place the ball on base on the angle. And since the quarterback's not under any pressure, we push it a little forward from the back using that half-inch spacing block that I was talking about before. Once we're set up, we kick this stuff out of the way, making sure that any unengaged defenders are pivoted towards the catch point of ball and receiver, and we run the play. Now we're going to go with the other scenario where the receiver is open, and that's if he has enough room underneath the defensive coverage. So once again, we start by measuring from the quarterback to the receiver. He's in the white zone. This time, you take the coverage circle, and instead of putting it in front of his helmet, you put it over top of him with this point over the top of the back of his base. When you do that, if the defender's helmets are outside of the circle, then the receiver is open and you can throw to him. If the defender's helmets are touching the circle or underneath the circle, then the receiver is not open and you cannot throw to him. In this example, the defender's helmets are outside the circle and the receiver is open. Now you look at that arc. You see the quarterback's within that arc, but this time you can't throw over top the receiver. If you throw over top the receiver with the defenders over top, then the pass is likely to be intercepted. So anytime there are defenders playing over top the receiver, the pass is going to be thrown at an angle on one side of the receiver or the other, depending upon where the quarterback is. The quarterback, in this case, is to the left of the receiver, so the ball is going to be coming on the left side of the receiver. And since the quarterback is within that arc, the ball is going to be coming in using the 30-degree angled game piece. And since the ball is coming in from the side, the game piece will be lined up alongside the receiver with the back of the game piece up against the back of the receiver's base. Then we're placing the ball on base along that angle. The quarterback's not under any pressure, so we're using that half-inch spacing block. Before we remove the game piece, we note where the catch point is, which is the point of the game piece, and we pivot any and all defenders who are unengaged towards that point. Now we get rid of the game piece and the block, and we're ready to run the play. And here's what it would look like if the quarterback was under pressure. The ball goes at the back of the game piece. Pivot the defenders, run the play. You break out that 45-degree game piece when the quarterback's outside that arc. Set it up alongside the receiver just like you did the other game piece. And here's a non-pressure pass. And like in the other example, set the ball and base up at the back of the game piece when there's pressure. Pivot your defenders and run your play. Now we're going to look at a open receiver on a comeback route to the quarterback. And just to make this clear, I know I'm showing you all of these examples in the white range, but the same principles are going to apply in the red and blue range. You will just be using different sized coverage circles and angled game pieces for each range. So on the comeback route, you're going to take the side of the circle with those 45-degree angles and still face it towards the quarterback. But this point here, on the opposite side of the circle, is going to be placed over the back of the receiver's base. And you can see those defenders' helmets are outside of the circle, so this receiver is open. And you can also see that that quarterback is within the arc that you should be familiar with by now. So we break out that 30-degree angled game piece. We'll need a placeholder to put it up against because the receiver's on the other side of the circle. I'll just put a player there, but you should have a spare base that you can use for this purpose. Now it's just a matter of lining the game piece up and lining the ball on base up on the angle. Here in the non-pressure situation, and then here, if the quarterback's under pressure, up against the back of the game piece. Then you're ready to kick your placeholder out of the way, your game piece out of the way, and run the play. If your quarterback's outside of that arc, you're going to use the 45-degree game piece. And I think something that would be fair to do is if the quarterback is directly opposite along that center line, we would place the ball directly opposite the receiver as well along that center line, using the spacing block to push the ball in from the edge if it's not a pressure pass, or up against the edge of the circle if the quarterback's under pressure. Here's a couple quick considerations. If the receiver is open by coverage circle or by virtue of being in front of the defenders, but the catch point of the relevant game piece is out of bounds, then the receiver is not open and you cannot throw to him. Here's another case. Got defenders over top. Looks like the receiver's open, but the game piece is obstructed by a teammate. Can't throw to him. Not open. If you have simultaneous touching of the ball between receiver and defender, or almost simultaneous where you really aren't sure who caught the ball first, and you don't have a camera to help you determine who catches the ball, then I'm calling the pass incomplete. If there's contact between defender and receiver outside of a base length away from the ball on base, then it's going to be pass interference on whichever player's front of base is facing away from the ball. If both players are facing away from the ball, then I think I'm just going to call it incidental contact. Okay, in this last section, I'm going to go over how I created the coverage circles and their dimensions, the dimensions I used on these sticks that go out in front of the receiver, how I created the 30 and 45-degree game pieces. The red range coverage circle is 5 inches in diameter. The white range coverage circle is 6.5 inches, and the blue range is 9.5 inches. These dimensions are subject to change. I am game testing this stuff right now, and I'm going to need more than one exhibition game to determine whether or not these are good to go. To create these circles, I just use a compass and a protractor to create a master template like this one, laid a transparent divider over the master template and traced it. You can see this is the 6.5 inch master template I use for the white range coverage circle. The 30-degree and 45-degree game pieces, how did I make them? Well, you saw in the game example how when defenders are over top, I am centering this line straight over the middle of the receiver, and that point right there where the center line meets the outside portion of the circle is going like right over the clip on the back of his base. So the first step in creating the game pieces is to lay the receiver down on the exact same position that he would be on the circle in the game. Back of base against the point where the center line meets the outside of the circle. Once he's in that position, you draw a line alongside of his base up to the halfway point of the circle. That line is going to represent that one edge of the game piece that's going up against his base during the game. Then I drew a 30-degree angle. And where that line alongside of his base meets that 30-degree angle, that's the outline exactly of the 30-degree game piece. So I just got myself a piece of foam board and a ruler and a pencil, lined it up, and cut out the game piece with an X-Acto. And that's what this is. It's like foam board and poster board. You could use anything to make these. You could use cardboard. Cardboard might be easier than this. It's just, whatever you use, you have to make it thick enough so that when you place it on the game board, it's not slipping under his base. It's lining up against his base. And so the same thought process went into the 45-degree angle, right? There's the line for the 45 degrees. There's the line for the side of his base. That creates the outline that you're going to use to cut out the 45-degree game piece. Now onto the sticks that measure the distance the ball is placed out in front of the receiver. For the non-pressure regular pass, it's a half inch for the red, and then you're counting from here to there for the white. So it's a full inch for the white and an inch and a half for the blue. For the pass with pressure, you're looking at 3/4 of an inch for the red, an inch and a quarter for the white, and then 2 inches for the blue. This will conclude my take on ball and base passing. I hope you find the content useful. Please comment, like, and subscribe, and thanks for watching.